Hello to the world and anyone out there who's watching. I'm the amazing Tomahawk Tri, the JCat guy, and I'm gonna be honest, I'm not really a Resident Evil. There are so many games in the series, and I've only really played the newer ones. I played a bit of Resident Evil 6 co-op with my friend once. It was okay. And I played like 5 minutes of the originals remaster when it was free on PS Plus. Then I got lost and haven't touched it since. Really want to give it another shot though. Then, right when I thought the series wasn't for me, I got a Walmart gift card from a raffle. Don't worry, I'm getting to the good stuff. So I go to Walmart and I'm like, dude, I could get a game with this. After narrowing down my options, I had to decide. Fallout 4 or Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. I had every reason not to pick this game. I didn't like the beginning hour demo, and the series as a whole never really sounded interesting to me. But honestly, I kinda just wanted to use my expensive little PSVR headset that was just kinda there. Also, Fallout 4 is like really fucking long, and I don't got that kind of time.
Anyways, I get RE7, install it on my PS4, get told not to tell Aunt Rhody that everybody's, and that's when the magic hit. I finally got it. I knew exactly what made the series special, but we'll get to that in a bit. Ever since then, I now consider Resident Evil 7 my favorite horror game ever. I mean, it's not a very long list, but still, Ethan Winter's terrifying experience at the Baker house was one of the most unique horror experiences I've ever had. Then there's Resident Evil 2. The remake, not the original. I haven't played that one. I almost never got this game. If it weren't for GameStop's Black Friday deals, I never would have been able to explore the Raccoon City police station after the city went to hell. I even replayed a bit of it to get footage for this video, and the magic never left. Everything from the characters who all have a purpose in the story, to the world building which can actually have fun with a dreary tone, to the gameplay which anyone who's played a good Resident Evil game can tell you is the best part. Exactly as it should be. There's a surprising amount of tension that comes from just about everything you do. Shooting zombies, looking for items, exploring the police station. It's all handled with Resident Evil's trademark terror. So, naturally, I was looking forward to Resident Evil 3's remake.
Again, I hadn't played the original. Just putting that out there. Not only did I not have a PlayStation back then, I was a good little boy who was not allowed to play M-rated games. But even beyond that, Resident Evil was a series I just sort of knew about. I remember hearing how scary those games were and being afraid of even the box arts, which, let's be real, were scary as fuck to any 8-year-old whose most mature experiences came from YouTube poops. But then that little boy grew up. And by grew up, I mean played the God of War 3 demo at a Blockbuster Video. To this day, I have no idea how that was allowed in public.
So anyways, Resident Evil 3 was shown off at a State of Play after being leaked everywhere. But anyways, the game seemed to have an emphasis on the psychological effects of the situations you'd get yourself into. It felt like it wanted to relentlessly assault the player with a new kind of tension that stays true to what the series is known for. A kind that doesn't let up, putting the player in the hands of the game itself at all times. Oh yeah, and it comes out in 5 months. Normally this type of thing would be cause for alarm. Let's not forget, this game came out only a little more than a year after RE2 Remake. But Capcom have proven themselves to be a competent modern developer, especially when it comes to newer installments of older series. Devil May Cry 5, Mega Man 11, Monster Hunter World, all being pretty well received as newer games from old IPs.
I mean, I haven't played any of those games, but I think it's safe to trust Metacritic on this one. And speaking of Metacritic, want to know which one is best received? Resident Evil 2 Remake.
So yeah, people had every right to be excited. The game was even marketed with the vibes the State of Play trailer gave off. Relentless, hardcore, and tough as nails.
But as the game's release date approached, Capcom wasn't really hyping up this game. The closest thing we got was a demo that released a few weeks before the game's actual release. I did try out the demo, but it just kind of felt like more Resident Evil 2, so my first thought was, maybe I should consider buying Final Fantasy VII Remake instead. And then my second thought was, I have to review this. So, I went to the PlayStation Store and put money down on a preload. I did have a physical copy pre-ordered at GameStop, but let's just say the T-Virus shut that down if you catch my drift.
So, here's my review of Resident Evil 3.
Now, to fully discuss this game, I think it's best to start with one question. What is Resident Evil? Not necessarily on the surface, like, it is a game of course, but what kind of game? Resident Evil is a series of survival horror games that basically play out like a campy zombie movie. They have you exploring someplace, could be anywhere, in order to survive. Along the way, zombies block your path and it's up to you to decide whether to kill them or save your bullets. Can't forget those puzzles either, you need them for a brief moment to catch your breath and change the pace of the game a bit. You solve the puzzle and now you have something to help you move forward. The word for Resident Evil at the end of the day is satisfying. Every action from killing a zombie to solving a puzzle should feel satisfying. And that's just scratching the surface. Why is it so important to ask this question? Because honestly, it feels like the developers forgot to.
Now, to be fair, this game is still fun, but everything in the game that's good always ends up having some kind of flaw that goes with it, especially when compared to its predecessor. In fact, remember how I said I replayed a bit of 2 Remake to get footage for this video? That's because I knew when I wrote this script I'd end up comparing the two.
But I don't want to make a comparison video. I'm going to try to look at this game on its own, but I'm also going to bring up the other modern games when necessary to make a point. I want to talk about why this game works good as a game and very poorly as a Resident Evil game. Though the focus is going to be more on the latter. Just putting that out there.
So, if I'm being honest, this game's opening is kinda great. I mean, I was laughing my ass off when it started with a ridiculous live-action cutscene that immediately jumps to the extreme, but it's when you gain control that things really get interesting. You play as Jill Valentine, a member of STARS. Don't ask me what STARS does, I honestly couldn't tell you. Who has been quarantined inside her apartment because it's strongly implied that she's infected with the T-Virus. All she wants to do is leave the city, but, of course, she's stuck in her apartment. Which is exactly why The Last of Us got delayed, and yet this game comes out and people are fine with that, so, you know, they didn't need to do that. They didn't need to. I want to know what happens, and I don't want the spoiler. Anyways, she is eventually forced to leave when she's attacked by Nemesis, and believe me, we'll get to him. You eventually make it to the streets of Raccoon City, and, well, long story short, end up trying to help Umbrellas, the bad guys who created the T-Virus, rescue team get a train moving to evacuate survivors. As far as openings go, this is a pretty good start. It's a bit on the extreme side, which is usually saved for the end of these games, but it made me want to see where the story goes. I was especially interested in where the whole Jill is infected thing would go. But I also wanted to save the survivors. I wanted to learn more about Nemesis. And, of course, I wanted to escape Raccoon City. The story sets up a lot of these motivations, not just for Jill, but for the player too. That's what a good Resident Evil game does. It starts at least somewhat simple, but gives you motivation to survive, to keep going. As far as setups go, these motivations kept me engaged. Thing is, the answers to these questions are either disappointing, unsatisfying, or non-existent. I don't want to spoil what they are in case you haven't played the game, but suffice to say, I lost interest in the story about at the time I got to the sewers.
Now I know what you're thinking. Tom, it's a Resident Evil game. The story's not important. See, that's just not true. Sure, the contents of the story in these games don't really matter much other than to give context to the weird shit that's happening. But the story itself also serves a purpose to the player.
Most of the time when something happens in these games, it's for a reason. And when it happens, you feel like you need to keep going all the more. Could be to develop intrigue, or give you something or someone to fight against, or even something as small as a character opening a door for you. It usually means now you have something more to work towards. Resident Evil 3, more often than not, will either fail to give you that motivation, or just straight up not even try. Take Nemesis for example. He's a character introduced early on I genuinely wanted to know more about. He's an important part of the story, but the most we learn about him is that he wants to kill Jill for some reason. Why? It's not even the type of thing you're supposed to speculate on. He just wants to kill Jill specifically. What this game easily could have done is explore his origins a bit. Maybe give Jill a reason to hate him besides he attacked her in her apartment. The game clearly wants you to hate him, but they just don't give you enough reason to.
Without spoiling anything, they do explore the origins of both 2 Remake and 7's main monsters in different ways, so it can be done. Yet I think the most they do in this game is maybe mention him in a note or something, but that's it. What I'm trying to say is, I had no good reason to want to kill Nemesis. We'll get back to Nemesis a bit later, but I just wanted to give that example.
Of course, there's more to this game than just the story. But it's all just as flawed. Let's start by talking about exactly what this game is. This is a fucking action game. Sure, there's RE2's controls, and it even runs on the RE engine that both 2 Remake and 7 were built on. But therein lies the problem. The gameplay was designed for a horror experience. I'm not going to knock the engine for this because it's clearly not its fault, but rather it's the way the game was designed. Resident Evil 2's controls were designed in such a way that you'd likely be walking in small hallways and rooms with little room to breathe. In RE3 you're exploring Raccoon City most of the time, which, of course, is a city. So not only is there a lot more space now, there's also zombies everywhere. There are often way too many zombies in one area at a time, which is where one of the many quote-unquote quality of life improvements was made. If you press R1, you can quickstep. You can even dodge roll if you time it right. At first, this may seem like a godsend, giving you a way to run past zombies without taking damage.
Okay, 1?
More often than not, you'll quickstep into zombies rather than right past them.
2?
This only further proves my point that this is an action game.
And 3?
They only put this in there because they had to, not to improve the experience. It was the only way to accommodate for so many zombies on screen at once. This isn't Dead Rising where you can take out zombies like it was nothing. You have to rely on your guns, which can only rarely one-shot zombies, and that's only if you get a headshot. See, that's the thing. The game focuses on combat way more than it should. For anyone who's never played a Resident Evil game, you should know that the combat is the worst part of the gameplay. Intentionally. In a good Resident Evil game, the combat is absolute shit because they want you to feel as helpless as possible. Think of it this way. Imagine your house is full of zombies, but you happen to have a gun to defend yourself. You're probably under a lot of stress, especially since you only have a few bullets in your gun. You have to make sure you use those bullets wisely, and the pressure to survive is forcing you to be cautious. Now, do you blow all your bullets out at once? Or do you take your time to make sure your shots land? If you chose the latter, you truly understand what it's like to play a Resident Evil game. If you chose the former, congratulations! You just died! Also, you're playing Resident Evil 3. The combat was designed in such a way to make you think before you shoot. Do I have enough time to get a headshot? Is it even safe to shoot? Will I need these bullets later? Those are questions you should ask yourself every time you hold L2. But not in Resident Evil 3. In this game, you're given way too much ammo, and it's almost never safe to go outside unless you plan on killing at least one zombie. Here's the thing. It still plays like Resident Evil 2, meaning that helplessness is still there. So you're often stuck in the middle of several zombies with your best defense against overwhelming odds being shitty combat mechanics originally meant to make it feel like you might not win. All you need to do to make that sentence work for Resident Evil is remove the word overwhelming. I get it wants you to feel unsafe at all times, but just design the levels in a way that doesn't require you to fight every fucking time. If I shoot every zombie I see, I'm not going to be afraid of them eventually. Sure, they still feel like a threat, but not nearly as threatening as in 2 Remake. And get this! There weren't nearly as many zombies in that game. I know, crazy, right? Less is more is an idea the series really understands when it wants to. Sure, there are times in other games when it doesn't want to, but in Resident Evil 3, it never wants to. If I had to guess, I'd say this is because the game wants you to fear death, so it puts you in near-death situations all the time. And while these can actually be pretty exciting, they're never scary. Let me put it this way. Other games in the series' idea of a scary moment is a tense encounter with some kind of monster. An encounter where running is just as scary as fighting. Even the fact that the decision was up to you in the end was a scary decision to make. It didn't matter what kind of monster. It could still easily kill you, no matter if it were a zombie, a licker, or just about anything in the game. Resident Evil 3's idea of a scary moment is a chase scene on a burning bridge. In other words, this game thinks Uncharted is fucking PT. Sure, there are tense encounters with monsters in Resident Evil 3 as well, but the fear is gone once you learn how to kill each of them. Then it's either tedious or way too easy. A good example of this are the Hunter Gammas you meet in the sewers. Their design is scary, and the way they get introduced is scary and disgusting, like they come out of the pipes like shit, but that just made it even more unnerving. Also, they can kill you in one hit. Okay, good first impression. Then you use the shotgun. They're now in a stunlock, making them easier to kill than a single zombie. So many enemies in this game are like this. They start scary the first time you meet them, then they're just a small hurdle and nothing more.
Okay, so the combat isn't great and the enemies aren't scary, but that's not everything. There's also exploration. That's a big part of Resident Evil, right? Right! But this game doesn't care.
To be fair, there is a bit of exploration in this game, but the problem is they try something new here that actually works against the game. The game is now level-based, as opposed to having one open, interconnected world. I don't know who thought this was a good idea, but it wasn't.
Why? Well, I don't know much about the first Resident Evil, but I do know it got its name because you explore an old mansion with evil secrets. A mansion. Meaning you have a small world to explore, but as you go forward, you unlock more and more the more you explore.
It was like a Metroidvania. You go here, get something to help you progress, then you go there, and now you have more to explore. That, my friends, is the core of what should be Resident Evil's exploration. Now one of the best parts of the series has been bastardized for no clear reason.
Imagine your favorite Metroidvania for a sec. Now make it so that the game now has levels to beat instead of an open world to explore. You can still explore the levels and there's still secrets to find, but now you have to explore each section one at a time, with no way to go back. How does that make you feel? It's just another platformer, isn't it? That's exactly why this doesn't work. If you want to explore someplace, you better while you're there, or you're kinda screwed because there's no going back.
Another problem exploration in this game has is... well, let's go back a bit. Remember how I said they put in way too many enemies in this game? That's the main reason I didn't want to explore Raccoon City. I could go to that one area I missed to see if there's something worth getting, but most of the time, it was just too risky. I didn't want to waste my bullets or risk taking damage because, more often than not, all I got was a few bullets. Very rarely did I actually feel the risk was worth it. So, I just didn't care about exploring. I would leave multiple areas red after I moved on to the next level, which is less than I can say for the other games in the series where I wanted to find everything I could, leaving no room red. Not in this game. And I tried. I really did. But at a certain point, I just didn't care. I didn't even really need to explore in the end. I'd just find the next key item and go.
The weird thing is, despite this, I didn't want to rush through the game. Sure, I wanted to get a review out as soon as I could. That hasn't turned out so well if you couldn't tell by the way. But I did want to see what this game had to offer. Keep in mind, the story did keep me engaged enough to want to keep going, even if it wasn't overall satisfying. Plus, despite what I've said, I was still having fun with this game. Felt like another game I just wanted to clear off my backlog, but it was still fun. I wanted to take my time with this game. But here's the thing. This game doesn't want you to take your time.
In fact, I felt rushed throughout my whole playthrough, not by my own doing, but by the game's. It feels like the game just wants you to get through it real quick, and that's a problem. First of all, the game's story is really fast-paced, like, most horror games. See, it often has you moving to the next thing, then the next thing, and so on, to the point where you can't keep up. A good Resident Evil game knows it can take its time because it wants you to see what the game has to offer. It wants you to make the most of your time playing so you can not only get your money's worth, which the series typically isn't even focused on doing, but also have fun making progress. Again, this is something Resident Evil 3 isn't focused on. It instead wants to take you from place to place without any time to do what the series is good at, which is... well, that's a long list, but I already mentioned most of them, so you should know them by now. Second, the game's new focus is on building intense set pieces that are much more thrilling for Jill than they are the player. So basically the game just wants you to do one thing, then you're in an intense situation, then the game tries to be Resident Evil again with, as previously stated, mixed results, then you're back in an action scene or boss fight. The original tone of the game is therefore thrown out the window, but the point I'm trying to make is it also breaks the pacing of the game. It goes from moderately fast to, let's say, pretty fast. It doesn't go full platinum games, but it goes and it stays too fast to really build true horror.
Almost feels like that's not even what they're going for, to be honest. It's definitely trying, but the thing is, the player isn't climbing a burning building to fight Nemesis wielding a flamethrower. Jill is. Jill is the one going through these intense situations. The player is just controlling her. The way it should work is the player needs to be able to project themselves onto the character they're controlling and feel their fear. But with Jill, and yes, even Carlos, the game's second playable character, I can't imagine myself as these characters in these situations. Why? They aren't afraid of what's going on around them.
They don't seem like they could be just anyone who happened to have a really bad night like Leon, Claire, and especially Ethan. They seem like capable badasses who are only an inch over their head. They're always in danger, sure, but all they have to do to get out of most of the situations is swim up a bit. That isn't scary. Being ill-prepared and being forced to face the zombie apocalypse head-on hoping you'll survive is. Jill has done this before, being one of the protagonists of the first game, so she knows what she's doing. But it's more than that. She isn't afraid to fight, which isn't how you're supposed to feel playing Resident Evil. The combat's garbage, remember? You want to feel like you might not survive. In gameplay, not the story. Let's not forget, this is supposed to be, and still claims to be, survival horror. So when the main character acts like they're gonna get through this, you yourself can't be afraid of what's going on because the character is meant to be an extension of the player. Even then, like I said, it's hard to put yourself in the character's shoes, at least in the way I should be able to, because they aren't just anyone like they should be. They're action movie heroes. And being an action movie hero in the zombie apocalypse isn't scary.
This type of power fantasy could work better in any other kind of game, but not in survival horror. Let me put it this way. Dying in this game feels like dying in a superhero game like Infamous or Saints Row 4.
When you die in those games, you put up a fight using all the tools at your disposal, but it turned out to be too much. You felt like you could do it, and probably could if you gave it another go, but there were so many enemies and you just couldn't keep track. Now you just quickly respawn and all you want to do is give it another go. Sound like Resident Evil? Well, it shouldn't, but it kinda is now, I guess. Now, to be fair, that is a bit of an exaggeration. I mean, you can't jump over buildings in this game. Shit, I'm not giving Capcom any ideas, am I? But anyways, when in combat in Resident Evil 3, you aren't in total control of the situation, but since combat is encouraged, you eventually feel a little powerful too early in the game. You shouldn't even feel a little powerful in these games. Because of this, the game makes it feel like you can handle these confrontations. Then you die and you feel like you need to put another quarter into your PS4 to keep playing, especially during boss fights. You should instead feel like you failed because you did, and now you are dead. When I died in this game, I was just like, okay, I got it this time. When I should have been like, okay, I need to do this time. But keep in mind, I said this type of power fantasy could work better. I didn't say it doesn't work at all, because it does what it's supposed to. It makes you feel powerful. Like you're able to survive and make it through the disaster in Raccoon City. It doesn't make you feel like a god or anything, but you do feel like you're going to be okay. It's at least something to get you through the game. Even the arcadey feeling of boss fights is enjoyable, almost in a Cuphead kind of way. And I fucking love Cuphead. You know what to do, because they literally tell you when you die, and you keep trying until it works. If that sounds fun, it is! It just isn't Resident Evil. Whether or not that's a bad thing will depend on who you ask, but my answer is, it is a game, right? So, isn't it supposed to be fun? The boss fights themselves are deceptively easy, especially compared to the other games I played, but they're kinda supposed to be. They want you to keep trying to use the tools you have to overcome these challenges until you do. Not in a way that's traditional of the series, but one that makes you feel capable. If that's what they were going for, which honestly wouldn't surprise me, they succeeded. Because you're taking on increasingly bigger monsters with each fight. If you're not scared, at least you can feel like a badass. Thing is, there's like a million other games that do that better, so if you're playing this game for that reason, then why are you playing this?
Anyways, back to the other stuff. There are puzzles in Resident Evil, right? What puzzles?
They've been a staple of the series since the beginning, and yet they barely exist in this game. Most of the quote-unquote puzzles are just bring this here and do this, and that's it. I mean, they do try to have puzzles, but they're often too simple and too easy.
No, I'm not huge on puzzles because I don't think that good and I don't want my brain to explode. But I was at least able to get through 2 and 7 just fine. Now all you have to do is find something And you just solved the puzzle! Now don't you feel like a smarty boy knowing how to use a battery pack to open doors in the sewers? How about some ice cream? I think you deserve it. You know this game is rated M and not E, right?
Like, the game needs to respect the player's intelligence if it's even going to try to have puzzles. Puzzles meant to reward the player with progress or some kind of secret. When you make the puzzles this easy, it feels like you're rewarding them for having a simple mind, which is kind of insulting their intelligence. You would think after the other two modern Resident Evil games, they'd have faith in their players' intelligence, but it doesn't feel like that.
I know exactly why they did this. They wanted to, 1, make the game more accessible to a modern market, and 2, focus on the action that this game has so prominently. Here's the thing. 1, they definitely weren't marketing the game to newcomers, so accessibility should have been more irrelevant. And 2, if you couldn't tell by watching this video so far, focusing on action is this game's biggest downfall, so naturally, it doesn't work.
My solution to this problem, assuming this game wants to be an action game, is to remove the puzzles entirely. I know, that sacrifice is something considered a big staple of the series, but to those who actually played the game, think about your last playthrough. Did the puzzles really matter that much in the game?
Imagine the game without them. In fact, replace them with more action, just to fill out the time. Would the game be much different? No, it wouldn't. And furthermore, it would allow them to put the focus where it matters. It wouldn't be Resident Evil anymore, but at least it would be more focused.
Next, let's talk about Nemesis. I already mentioned him a few times during this review, but one thing I didn't mention was how he was my biggest fear going into this game, and not for the reason you'd think. See, when promoting this game, Capcom really tried to push how scary Nemesis could be. They talked about how he could use weapons, break into safe rooms, and would constantly hunt you down. It made sense that they'd want to push Nemesis in their marketing, being one of the most iconic monsters in the series, but that clearly wasn't what they were leaning on in the marketing. It was Mr. X, or the Tyrant, or whatever he's called in RE2, the blue wrinkly guy. Point is, Resident Evil 2 had a really tall blue mutant, I think, guy with a hat and trench coat who basically patrolled the police station so he could punch you.
When the game first came out, he was all anyone talked about. People were always like, he's fucking terrifying! But no! What they should have said was, he's fucking annoying.
Long story short, he'd often appear when you were in the middle of something, and he can't be killed. So basically, you had to drop what you were doing to run away from him. I could sing praises for 2 Remake all day, but the one problem I have with the game personally is Mr. X. So you could imagine how I felt when the marketing for this game really tried to bank on him when talking about Nemesis. He was promoted as a superpowered Mr. X, and I really didn't want to deal with that. But people seem to love Mr. X so much, so they had every right to be excited. If they want a relentless mutant science experiment to chase them down while they escape Raccoon City, then Capcom made it seem like they deliver. How is he in the actual game?
He's barely in it. Yeah. I mean, he's there in the beginning, but aside from that, he's just the boss battles. The original game was titled Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, by the way.
I don't know how prominent he is in the original game, but here he serves his Mr. X role in the first level and maybe a little somewhere else before being relegated to a plot device who mostly only comes in when the game needs to have an intense set piece that moves the story forward. When he does appear as, let's just say, the Mr. X character, he thankfully is only just as annoying as his predecessor. That's saying a lot for someone who has extendable tentacles that trip you and the all-powerful presence of an anime villain. I found him a lot more annoying in the demo, so maybe they toned him down a bit? I don't know. Anyways, I'd like to add that yes, he does use weapons in boss battles and chase scenes. Probably for the better though. If Mr. X had a gun in RE2, that game would pretty much be unbeatable. Same goes here. If Nemesis had his rocket launcher while I was looking for a key item, then he would top Mr. X's annoyance levels for sure. But I can understand why this would be a disappointment for some. I'm positive people love running from rocket launchers because Overwatch is an esport. Anyways, the fact that I only used Nemesis sparingly and for set pieces is not something they mentioned in the marketing, and understandably so, but they really should have tried to fulfill that promise. That is what the fans want after all.
I'm sure you all heard the story by now. Resident Evil 3 is not the game the fans wanted, and they made that very clear on the internet. But, regardless, it was a critical success. Not nearly to the levels of its predecessor, but still, critics seem to love it. And despite what I said in this video, I want to make it clear. I do like this game. But like I said, for everything this game does right, the same part that got it right also does something wrong. I had fun, just not for the right reasons.
I liked getting a new gun or finding the next key item, but the exploration required to find them isn't safe nor is it satisfying. I liked the story and it made me want to keep going, but it fails to answer the questions it raises. I like the boss fights, which in itself is more than I can say for the other games, but they felt too arcadey to be truly scary. If this were Resident Evil 2 Remake, none of these downsides would apply. And while I acknowledge the flaws of 7, I still recognize it as one of my favorite horror games because it knew how to take risks and set up some truly terrifying concepts and enemies. This game just wants you to experience intense set pieces that ultimately sacrifices the identity of the series. It does feel fun to be the action hero this game wants you to be, but that's not what you play a game like this for.
Now it's time to give this game a score. The score itself may surprise you because, get this, it's not negative. Because as flawed as this game is, it is what it was going for. Even if what it was going for wasn't great. I give Resident Evil 3 a 7.7 out of 10. I want to make this clear, this is a good game, even if it does feel a bit average at times. It's not worth full price, like it only took me 6 hours to beat it with little incentive to replay it. But I still think Resident Evil fans should give it a shot. Go in expecting Resident Evil, but know coming out that you're getting something different. Also, worth pointing out is that while writing this script, it was reported that Capcom is not only working on Resident Evil 8, but also a remake of Resident Evil 4, widely considered the best in the series. I haven't played 4, but I'm really excited for both games. Maybe this time Capcom will have time to take feedback from their fans and turn out something truly great. I hear 4 is a bit action heavy, but I have confidence they can do it right next time. Anyways, if you like this video and you want to see more Tom, like this video, maybe subscribe. So I want to do more game reviews. I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I do want to review games. I have a few ideas, and I also want to do gameplay. I don't know if it's on this channel or a different one yet, but I'm going to do gameplay. Primarily Dreams, like Dreams gameplay, because I want to explore the weird rabbit hole that is Dreams. But I also want to do other gameplay like first impressions, stuff like that. So if you like gameplay and you want to see people talk about, well, also, I guess, I do want to review games. I want to review more games. I want to have an audience of people who like me for reviewing games, I guess. I don't know. This part's unscripted, so I'm just saying whatever I want. Anyways, I'm just going to ask the question that I ask in every one of my videos, but no one knows the answer to, not even me, and that question is, are you sure you want to quit?